Bosses of Reddit, what is the stupidest thing you have had to fire someone for? Story 1. One of the security guys at my company was caught masturbating during the day at the main reception desk by a female PA. When we had his exit interview, we asked him why he did it, and he just said he felt really comfortable at work and got carried away while browsing Reddit. Had been with the company for years. The best part was a colleague of mine who came back from vacation a week later and asked what happened to Ron. Someone said he was fired, and immediately the guy said, "Oh, what? Did he get caught jerking off?" But he didn't even know. He just got the vibe that Ron would be the type to at work. Story 2. One of my technicians used our remote software to start typing to a girl whose machine he took control of. He opened Notepad, wrote what up, and then went to Pornhub. Supervisor gets an email about harassment the same day, and he's gone the next morning. Story 3. Employee wrote on the bottom of a customer's oil filter. Customer decided to change his oil one day. Something fired. Edit: at the time, employees were required to sign their initials for Upper Bay and Lower Bay with the date. The Upper Bay tech signed JJ, and the Lower Bay tech was as. JJ was pissed at as that day and finished the Lower Bay's initials with Shoal beside it and handed it to him to install. Customer found a month later doing his own oil change and brought the filter. Employee admitted it and was terminated from above. Still friends to this day, and he is now a teacher. Story 4. I once worked in a retail store where we all had our own access codes that allowed us to do stuff. And if our code didn't allow us to do it, we weren't supposed to be doing it. On his first day, during training, he managed to catch the general manager's code as he was typing it in and used it for about a week. Pretty much gave away thousands of dollars of equipment in the manager's name. It was particularly stupid because he did it because he still had his trainee position, which required somebody to look over most of what he did if he wanted to give discounts, etc. If he had waited another couple of days, he would have been moved up to full staff member and could have given out most of those discounts anyway without anybody noticing or caring. He just couldn't wait to give his friends all the free swag. Story 5. I am so excited to share. I had an 18-year-old employee go to Vegas for a long weekend. He had been late a few times before and had been warned that continued tardiness would result in disciplinary action. So this Einstein is headed back from Vegas with his buddy after they both blew all their money, and they realize that they don't have enough gas to make it back. He really doesn't want to be late. Already, you're probably thinking of the multitude of options available to these two fine, upstanding citizens. They could call saying they were in a jam, they could beg for 20 and see if anyone took pity on them, or they could steal some gas. They chose none of these options. The two of them decided the best option was to take a handgun from their trunk, go into a gas station, hold it up, and demand exactly 20. They then drove 1 mile down the road to the next gas station where they filled up, paid, and were surrounded by the police as they were attempting to pull back onto the road. When I first heard what happened, I was sure the story must be exaggerated or wrong. I knew the kid wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I never dreamed anyone could do something so amazingly idiotic. It still boggles my mind. Story 6. In high school, a guy I knew stole a giant Ronald McDonald made of Legos from the McDonald's he worked at. It was one of those guess the number of pieces contests. He got away with it. But later on, he was busted for stealing boxes of hash brown wrappers with Monopoly game pieces on them. Cops show up at his place to arrest him over the hash browns. Lo and behold, there sits Ronald in the middle of his room. Story 7. A concessions attendant gave a pot brownie to my 75-year-old door person at my movie theater. She didn't press charges, but he had to go. No paperwork on it either. I had him resign. Edit: this story clearly struck a chord with a lot of people. I'll try to answer as many questions as possible. She, the door person, didn't know what was wrong. A friend of hers visited that evening and figured it out. She told me the next day. I was off the day it happened. He concessions didn't deny anything. Actually thought what he did was 100 okay. Completely disconnected from what could have happened. Actually asked for his job back a few times. Years later, he apologized after going to rehab. I'm pretty sure the guy still smokes, just a guess. I haven't spoken to either of them in ages. The theater was in Northern California. That's as close as I want to identify it. This was a long time ago, and we worked it out with every party's agreement. I'm happy, and I'm fairly certain that they are too. Story 8. This would spend all day on this website talking to random people and embellishing his life. He would talk about these weird jokes that no one in the office got and spend a massive amount of time looking at pictures with text on it. The pictures weren't even different. It was all to collect these fake internet points. No idea why it was so appealing. Story 9. I was the manager of a Papa John's, and a lady called and complained about a driver going to fast near her kids. Driver comes back, and I say, "Pat, a lady called. Try and slow it down a bit." He goes postal in front of a packed audience of pickup customers. "Fuck you, man. Whose side you on?" "Not mad." "Pat, just be careful, nah." "You." "She's lying, Pat. Dude, not mad. Just be careful. I know that you need to go outside. Calm down. Dude, not mad at you. Don't worry. Fuck you. FLPPPBBT babble mibble babble. You're done, man. Go home. Most awkward pizza firing aside from when this dude tried to kill me when I worked on the coast. Pat SA nurse now. Manager at a delivery joint here. We had to let someone go because they decided to deliver pizzas in a stolen car. Story 10, I was an editor on my college's student daily newspaper. We had a photography staff that would photograph events, sports games, etc., but they'd also sometimes have to do stupid stock photo type things for feature or trend articles. Think like a photo of someone filling out a college application for a story on college admissions, or something. Anyway, we had two fodigs who were apparently in a group of friends that had formed some kind of snake cult, probably had another name that they used, but we called it the snake cult when we found out about it. The way we found out about it was that we started noticing this weird symbol in the background of some of our feature article photographs, on a post-it note in the background of shot of some library books, or in the shape of the food in a photo of some dining hall food for an article about meal plans. Once we discovered it, we looked back and saw it had been going on for months, so yeah, we had to fire some fodigs for slipping cult symbols into our student paper on a regular basis. Story 11, we worked at a place that bought and used cell phones. She bought a cell phone from a guy, and his Facebook was still open. She posted as the guy on his Facebook something like, "I'm a big idiot." Guy came back to complain. She was fired. Story 12, I had to fire this kid from a gas station I worked at. After he asked me if I ever poke holes in the condoms with a push pin as he proceeded to punch holes in condoms. I have no idea how long he was doing it, for he worked there for over a year. Story 13, this actually just happened. Our supplier came out onto my construction site and cooked everyone a free Barbie. This one bloke had a meltdown and almost had a fight with the chef. Their conversation started off like this: guy, where's the butter? Chef, ain't got no butter, mate. Guy, what kind of Barbie is this without any butter? Chef, a free one. If you don't like it, don't have it. Then the guy blew up yelling at the chef for making smartars comments and swearing his head off, while the chef thought nothing of it and remained really calm and telling the guy to take it easy. Our site does not tolerate this kind of behavior. Needless to say, we kicked the guy off site ASAP. Lost a job over a free Barbie and butter, lol. It turns out there was butter in the fridge. Story 14, receptionist who forgot to wear pants. I was at a satellite office and had 4 employees call me separately to let me know there were some previous issues, plus they were pretty sure she was on something. Story 15, late to the party, so I'm sure this will get buried. But here goes anyway. I was the assistant manager at a store that had an actual time clock and a point system. For those of you that don't know, a point system is basically just a magnet for turnover 1 minute late, and you get a point the same as if you're 30 minutes late. Call in sick, you get 2 points if I didn't log it at least 30 minutes prior to your shift. No call, no show, and you get 4 points. It took 8 points to get fired at this particular company, and the points were logged at headquarters, not at the facility. I had a single mother-dad bailed when she was pregnant that worked for me, and she was the best employee any human could ask, for she worked hard, stayed late if it was needed, picked up extra shift from coworkers that wanted off, and more importantly, she was good at her job. Well, her son got sick on her way to take him to the babysitter one day. He projectile vomited blood all over back seat. I saw the car, and it looked like a scene from a horror movie. Needless to say, she didn't call in. She panicked and took him to the hospital. Boom, she had 4 points. Over the next 2 weeks, he was in the hospital and had random tests. The boy was 4. So when those tests randomly popped up, she would call in to be with him instead of having the grandmother watch him while she was at work. Twice those tests were announced while she was on her way to work. So she had to call in, and I understood why she did. I am a father. I didn't mind working the long shifts to cover her absence. No decent human would have. I received a call the day after her second call in, while the child was being tested, and corporate made my heart sink. I had to fire this woman whose son was in the hospital, possibly dying, and I had to tell her that she was no longer employed. I spent over 5 hours arguing on her behalf to corporate. But it was to no avail. She came in the next day, I fired her like I was supposed to, and I immediately quit my job without notice. Story 16, I was managing a restaurant and did morning cash out. I checked all slips against the information in the computer. I noticed a new hire had really good tip averages the day before when I had been paying her out. The next day I was going through her slips and noticed a discrepancy, mainly that she had added a 1 in front of each tip and changed the total. How could I tell you, ask? She used different color ink. She was fired, and we refunded the money. Seriously, at least use the same color ink. Story 17, worked at a nightclub. One if the workers called in sick, but he was actually going to some party instead. Could you guess where they went after the party? Yes, to our nightclub. Story 18, one of my cooks asked for a smoke break. Told him to go for it. He hadn't come back after 10 minutes, so I looked out the window. He was smoking a crack pipe. He came back in, started cooking some food, turned to me, and said, "DJ's 9PD, I don't feel so good. I think I need to go home." "Yeah, Reggie." Maybe it's because you just smoke crack by the dumpster, get the out, nah man, I can still prep. I then spent 5 minutes explaining to him why I couldn't have a crackhead using a giant cheese knife. To this day, I don't think he still understands why he was fired. Edit from work. Hey, erase a picture of Reggie with identifying marks removed. We worked at this sort of post-Asian hybrid place that failed, and like many have pointed out, drugs were used by the kitchen staff. My only rules were, don't do anything on the clock and don't do it in uniform. Reggie had screwed up a few times. I hated letting him go because he actually was a good line cook. The guy found another cook job pretty quickly. Story 19, I had a manager steal a bag that a customer had left on the counter. He completely denied it too, and I believed him, but the customer was sure he left it there and asked to see the video. I hadn't seen anything odd, so I showed it to him. He pointed out the bag, which we watched until the manager of 10 years took the bag and left. Idiot. Story 20, not showing up and not calling in. Everyone has a phone and can make up a shitty excuse. Call and let me know you are not going to show up, so I can get someone else. There was one time I had to fire someone because I sent him out on a job that would only take 2 to 3 hours to complete. Before he left, he mentioned to the receptionist that he was going to make it last all day. She mentioned it to me, and sure enough, he returned over 8 hours later. Being dishonest with a client's money is not something I was going to tolerate. Story 21, I told him to stop getting high before work. I even told him he was a good worker when not high, and that I didn't care what he did off the clock. I literally told him that people could smell weed on him, and that he acted like an idiot while high. He apologized, agreed with me, even offered up the fact that it was, in fact, affecting his work. Next day, shows up stoned to the bone. Sorry, guy, you're fired. Story 22, personal hygiene. You'd think people would have the common courtesy to shower before working with others. That person smelled like pure BO with sprinkled on top. Story 23, I worked with a guy who got fired for buying on eBay all day at work. I thought this was pretty out there until I saw the other at work stories here. But still, I think this takes the cake because he was internet savvy and still paying for secondhand DVDs. That's varsity level work, stupid. Story 24, I used to manage a hotel. You would not believe the amount of female employees I had to constantly remind it was against company policy to have with the guests. One woman, she was about 20 years old, who I had to remind this of several times, was caught mid-act having with a guy that was about 65 and looked like Santa Claus. After she was fired, one of her coworkers told me that this woman had a Santa Claus fetish and thought she'd never get the opportunity to act on it, so it was worth possibly getting caught and fired. Girl was pretty decent looking too. Story 25, backstory. Employee Ed works a union job, works 40 hours per week, makes about $60K per year, full benefits, full pension, tons of paid vacation, and is in his early to mid-30s. Ed has absolutely no education. Did not even finish high school, is socially awkward, pretty much sucks at his job, is physically weak, often injured, never enough for a doctor to find a problem, just enough to get alternate duty. Basically, the picture I'm painting is that Ed would be homeless if it wasn't for this job for life he somehow lucked into. He is completely unemployable otherwise. Ed takes funeral leave for a Thursday and a Friday for his mother's funeral. Some other manager who seems to remember his mom dying a few years ago does some snooping and eventually asks for some proof. Ed turns in a fake obituary, gets found out, and fired. I still think about that guy sometimes. He turned down the best gig of his life for a stupid 4-day weekend, when he had like 20 paid days off available for use anyway. Edit to all the people saying, 20 days, that's nothing. Here in England, we get 2 years paid off every year one. I get it, different countries are different too. I never said this happened on January 1st. Maybe he only had 20 days left after using 20 more. 3. I was actually referring to individual paid days off in addition to paid vacation. Why comes in 5-day increments anyway? A PC technician was being pestered with questions from a customer about sales stuff. He lost it, and while looking the customer square in the face, the employee had his eyes closed, however, said, "Get away from me, or I'll eat your face." It took half the day to get over the laughter and WTF of the situation before we could even begin on paperwork. Story 26, worked at a fairly large used bookstore in NYC. We often listed and sold rare books online, and sometimes had really unusual items that were truly one of a kind, signed and numbered, or personally inscribed from one famous person to another or whatever. One day, we get a phone call from one of the managers from the huge bookstore up the street, which also happens to be our biggest competitor. He explains that he has a large stack of merchandise that he is sure was stolen from our store. Apparently, earlier that day, a fellow had come to his store with some books and art prints he was hoping to sell. The manager looked a few of them up and quickly deduced that they were stolen. 2 of the items in particular were really exceptionally rare, obviously identifiable as belonging to us. This would have all been bad enough, but the manager had one last piece of information to share. Thing is, he says, I'm pretty sure that the guy who brought them in works for you. I've seen him over there a bunch of times. He usually works Sundays and Mondays, tall guy, blonde hair, wears cowboy shirts, blah, 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 and proceeds to absolutely and without a shadow of a doubt identify our sales associate Dan. Dan had apparently gone into our rare book room, stolen the books, which were already listed for sale on the internet, walked an entire 4 blocks to one of the most famous bookstores in the city, and tried to sell his stolen loot to one of the booksellers he saw at least twice a week in our store. Unbelievable. If we hadn't fired him for theft, we would have had to fire him for the epic stupidity. Story 27 in the interview, he was told he would have to take a drug test if he was hired. He was hired. He failed the drug test. When I brought him in and told him that he failed, he said, yeah, I knew I would. Then why? I'm sure it's not unusual, but still, why bother? He quit another job to take one that he knew he would lose immediately. Why? The other job, by the way, was janitor in a high school, which I assume he went back to. Story 28, a dumb guy at work. Call him Julio. We worked clothing retail together. One night, closing shift, we're folding tons of clothing, working our way from the outer tables inwards, laughing and joking as we went. Julio is a fun guy to be around. Sometimes he'll moonwalk, dance, sing, general clownery to make the shift enjoyable. So that fateful night, we're almost done. About 8 of us are working on the last 2 tables of clothing. Julio does his funny dance from there to there and ends up grinding with a coworker. She dances along, and he poked her with his she noticed and angrily jumps away. Was dry her, pitching a tent, and he decided to continue dancing around with pelvic thrusts in everyone's direction. Needless to say, Julio and Julio Jr. were fired for harassment. Edit 1, the assumption that the girl he grounded against is the one who complained. I don't know who did. He had a history of behavior like that. He was an outgoing guy who got away with lots of stuff. Always joked and played around. I guess someone finally got sick of his after he was let go. I heard of other girls and customers express to varying degrees a sense of satisfaction. Had been doing that for a while, I guess. Worked at KFC. Got fired for doing cocaine at work, in the office, where there are cameras. In hindsight, probably should have seen it coming. He showed up to the interview with shirt with a Wheel of Fortune board on it. Said GFCK YRSLF, and underneath, how would you like to buy a vowel? Guess that was his nicest shirt. Also, I once saw him eat ice out of a bucket that had raw standing chicken water. Kind of speaks volumes of KFC that he even got hired. Story 29, not a boss, but HR. Had a guy on a temporary work comp transitional assignment at retail store. His regular job had very good pay, a lot of benefits, etc. The moron stole a used scuba suit from his temporary job site. On camera, bonus were well over 1,000 miles from any ocean. Story 30, am not a boss, but a guy at a former job got fired because he broke a light fixture when he was around with a mop. The manager on duty, who admittedly was a little insane, whipped his head around and in the most terrifying voice said, "Sweep that up, then get the out." Story 31, I got a great one. My friend and I were both district managers for a vendor company that worked in Home Depot's building displays and merchandising. One day, one of the workers was on the store phone talking with one of the owners of the company. Owner hears in the background an in-store page for a manager he knows had been fired a month before. Turns out this guy had made an hour-long recording of the inside sounds of a Home Depot and would play it on his stereo anytime someone would call him. Fooled everyone for months. My buddy and me drove to his house and parked outside and called him. My friend asked him where he was, and he goes into the store. We tell him, "You might want to look out your window." We see his curtain part a little bit and close fast. We told him, "Don't bother coming out, you're fired." Got to give him credit for the ingenuity, though. Story 32, had an employee call in sick a few busy retail Saturdays in a row. The pattern got me a bit suspicious, but I had no proof until a co-worker, who wasn't all too happy working up front shorthanded again, came into my office, cell phone in hand, to show me selfie photos that the sick employee had just posted to Facebook of her sunbathing. Story 33, this guy always tried to hide at work to avoid working. One day, I was looking for him, and I stepped into the bathroom. I noticed a shoe print on the back of the toilet, and I look up, and one of the ceiling tiles is pushed a little to the side. I climb up there, and this mother is hiding in the ceiling. Story 34, damn it, it's my time to shine, and I'm late to the party. I was working in Australia and hired an American from Oregon. Let's call him Mark. I too am American. Important. It wasn't one simple act, but a collection of retardancy so grand. I don't know if I can really type this. First things first, you wuff this guy. So I hired him because I needed someone pronto, and the hiring had to be done now. He was ready to go and able to do this relatively simple lifting job. The next day, he got kicked out of the hostel he was in because someone stole his meat out of the fridge. He then asked me if he could stay with me till he found a new hostel. Whatever, sure. Dumbest thing I have ever done. Next day, I'm sitting in my office in my house and I hear banging. WTF. I walk into the kitchen, other side of the house, and he is in there trying to cut a can of blackberries in half with a butter knife. No. Dude, what are you doing, man? How are you supposed to open these things? Bullshit, man. You with an opener, what? You mean like one of those things you use to open a beer? And he makes the hand gesture you, sorta. It's brother really, always on a pocket knife together. Different ends though. What, those are for beer, you're stupid. How would that even work? Beer bottles are screw off, I walk off. 10 minutes later, I walk to the kitchen for water, not really sure, don't remember, but he's sitting on the couch, and it looks like he broke the can open with a rock, eating the blackberries with his hands, covered in, smiling from ear to ear, I assume because he foiled natural selection yet again. 2 days later at this point, he has proven to be a horrible, horrible employee, but at home, mind-fucking blowing. Sitting in my office, he just walks in and asks for a pair of socks that, and I will let you borrow anything of mine except my underwear and socks. Nope, 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 his are dirty, and he doesn't want to do a load. I tell him no, and he complains a bit, but walks off. A few minutes later, he's back and is asking for a pair of scissors, Waytevs, top drawer I say. He grabs them, says thanks and walks off. He walks back into my office, but just stand behind me. Not saying anything, I ignore him for a solid minute. I can feel the energy building. Finally, I slump my shoulders and push off from my desk and turn around. This dumb mother is so proud of himself, he holds up 2 socks. What is that, D.U.D.? I made new socks, huh? I took one of my old socks, cut in half now. I have a new pair. It suddenly clicks. I hired a spastic. Dude, what are you talking about? You cut a sock in half. Now you just ruined a dirty sock. Back in my brain, holy new socks, clean socks. One sock covered his toes, but not his heel, and one sock covered his foot, but not his toes nor his heel. He wore those things for 3 days to prove a point. I fired him when I caught him bragging to a customer about hourly pay. But let's be honest here, it was the socks and blackberries that did it. Among other things, he didn't move out for another 3 days. Wasn't the boss sorry, but a coworker at the gas station job I had in high school got fired for just pulling scratch-off lottery tickets off the roll and scratching them off right on the counter, directly in front of the security cameras we all knew about. Story 35, parking in the fenced and lot chain link fence along the street. He was smoking weed in his car and having with his girlfriend, and the cops decided to investigate since they knew it was after hours and should be empty. He could have driven 20 feet more and been behind a building. Story 36, this will get buried, but this guy thought it was a good idea to weld a big open-top container of petrochemical solids oily dirt, and it caught my container and my excavator on fire. Picture. Story 37, had an employee show every other employee and every customer his really, really big pocket knife. He always follows his big reveal with a smug largest one allowed by law. After being repeatedly told to knock it off, we worked a help desk for crying out loud. I had to can him. Story 38 guy told everyone on the break room how the boss daughter wanted his, and the next day came to work and overdosed in the daughter and didn't want his. Story 39, my previous employer didn't exactly fire me, but did put me on a permanent, unpaid, forced medical leave until my migraines were resolved. I should note that I had not missed a single day due to migraines. I sued, and they settled. Story 40, in my old job, my boss was very trusting, one of the give everyone a second chance types. Usually it worked out, and he got hardworking people helping him. He would trust us with things like using the company gas card to fill up the department truck, working late on our own with nobody else in the building, helping ourselves to snacks from the stockroom, etc. My last year, there when he knew I was planning on moving on to a new job, he hired on a new guy, let's call him, who we all saw right away wasn't the brightest bulb. He would do things like try the starter on a lawnmower while someone was under it checking the blade. Still, despite all this, he was a hard worker and would do the labor-intensive jobs that nobody else really wanted, and the boss would occasionally loan him money as an advance on his paycheck when he needed gas money. Years later, I happened to run into an old coworker and chatted him up, asked how things were back at the company. He said had just gotten fired. I asked why, and it turns out that had been stealing the company gas card and filling up his Pinto with it. Yes, a Pinto. He'd sneak into the boss office after boss man had left for the day, get the gas card from his desk, and once everyone else was gone, he'd run down the street and fill up his car, then return the card like nothing happened. Well, he got busted when the boss saw a ton of late-night charges on the card, and the mileage on the truck just didn't add up to all the gas usage. Compare the shift times to when the charges were, and figure out quickly who was stealing the card at night. Things only got worse when he found out that all the cash he had loaned to for gas money was instead being used to buy crack for him and his girlfriend. I wish I could say I was surprised when I heard all this. I was not two different tellers. One was my ATM teller. She stole the cash from the same guy twice, who worked across the street. Didn't take long to figure out. Second was my vault teller. Stole $3K. On her day off was a yearly branch-wide surprise audit. She assumed she was done with audits for the quarter. The vault obviously was short. I don't know why these two thought they could get away with essentially robbing a bank. Story 41, as a recruiter, I've had to pull people off assignments for watching on their work computer on day one of the job. He left it up. The moron. IT came by while he was on his lunch break to install some software, and lo and behold, hardcore gay, The dude was married to a woman with whom he had children, BTW. Also had to pull a woman off an assignment when she spent a week getting hammered on vodka and drunk dialing her on-site supervisor. ETA, the first thing the managers did was investigate to make sure he wasn't the victim of a crappy prank. Even if they didn't check, my hands were tied. If the company where I place someone tells me to get them someone else, my personal opinion of it doesn't matter. I'm also fully aware that bisexuality is a thing, and it doesn't matter to me how someone gets their jollies as long as it's legal. I specified the type of thing he was watching because details are what make a story. Had it been girl and girl or MILF or BDSM or anything else, I would have said that too. And in those cases, I still would have specified the married with children part because it illustrates that he's not a young single guy. He's a man with a family to provide for and therefore a lot to lose by dicking around on the job. It also illustrates why he was watching at work, since he has a lack of privacy at home. And specifying married to a woman only provides the additional detail that the dude is either bi or gay, and maybe that's what he is trying to hide. Story 42 had to fire a brand new employee. Second day on the job for backing out the maintenance truck. He neglected to close the wide open passenger door, and it got caught on the concrete security pillars. Bent back the door past 90 degrees out. Then he attempted to drive forward, as if nothing happened, like he bumped into a curb. Several of our employees had to flag him down halfway down the parking lot because he wouldn't stop. "Oh, my bad," was all he said. We started mandatory drug tests for all new employees after that. Story 43, I had to fire someone for stealing someone's lunch from the break room. It was a security firm, and he was security tech. Everything was under camera except the bathrooms. I fired him because he should have known that, not because he stole someone's lunch. Story 44, I was working as an assistant manager of a small local restaurant chain. We hired a new waitress. She had lots of experience and was really personable. I liked her. She began her first shift, and things are going smoothly. She's tending to her tables, and the guests are all happy. She required very little training, as she was pretty much autonomous. Partway in her shift, she began to become uneasy and nervous. She approached the general manager and asked if she can run home quickly. He tells her no. She seems slightly upset but continues with her tables anyway. About an hour later, something is more visibly wrong. I decided to approach her. Since I'm a girl, I figured whatever issue she was having might be easier to say to me instead of our male GM. She begins to tell me that she got her period at the start of her shift and had no tampons or pads with her, and that she was bleeding through her underwear at this point. I felt awful for her, but I had none of my own to give to her. I asked the GM if she could leave for 5 minutes to go across the street to the convenience store to get some pads. His remarks were basically, she just needs to deal with it and continue her shift. He had many laughs at her expense throughout the night, telling the other employees about what a baby she was, and that she's whining. I'm not certain, but I'm sure it's a definite health risk to have a bleeding waitress tending tables and touching food. I had issue with this, but I didn't have authority over him. I asked if I could leave to get her some, to which he again refused. This poor girl starts crying. She tells him that she's saturated down there and really needs to leave, but she wants to come back to finish her shift. He had a lot of fun mocking her saturated plea. Finally, after hours of this poor waitress soaking in her own blood, he decides to let her leave. It was closing time by that point. He made me call her the next day to tell her that we won't be keeping her as a server. I hated it. I quit shortly after. They treated their employees like, and I'm so glad I got out of there. TLDR, new waitress got her period on the job. Boss wouldn't let her go buy tampons. Bled all over herself. Boss had me tell her not to come back. Story 45, a couple of co-workers decided to start dealing cocaine at the hospital we worked at and thought using the internal email system was a good way to keep in touch with customers.